People have said the PS2 was the golden age for a lot of genres, like racing and platforming, but there's one genre where I think that really rings true for, and that's survival horror. I mean, think about it for a second. You had hits like Silent Hill 2, 3, and 4. You had Resident Evil Outbreak, Code Veronica, Resident Evil 4. You had that other game that came out around the same time with Resident Evil 4 called Cold Fear. And there was another game that I see get brought up when talking about PS2 survival horror games. That game is Siren, or Forbidden Siren if you're not in the US. Now, I had known about Siren when it came out, but I wasn't into horror games back then. And my first experience with this game was a PS2 demo disc that came with a bunch of demos, and this was one of them, and it had one of the early levels on it. And I didn't get very far with that. The level doesn't give you any weapons, nor do you have any means of fighting back. And that threw me for a loop because at this point I wasn't used to games where you couldn't fight back. So when a Shibito came out of the darkness and choked my character out, I was terrified and never touched that demo again. But years later, when I had built up a tolerance and an understanding of horror games, it was one of those games that I wanted to give another shot. I had seen videos made on the series by another YouTuber named NitroRad that made me interested in checking it out again. It was only until fairly recently that I finally sat down and played it, and I'll just say, it was definitely a unique experience. But Siren was released in 2003 on the PS2 by Sony. It first came out in Japan on November 6th of 2003, just a tad after Halloween. Almost made it, but the rest of the world didn't get it until March and April of 2004. The game was directed and co-written by Keiichiro Toyama, and if that name rings a bell for you, it's because he was the director of a little-known underground horror game called Silent Hill back in 1999. Yeah, that Silent Hill. Toyama left Konami for one reason or another and went to work at Sony, and there he formed a new team called Team Siren. Interesting name choice since his team in Konami was Team Silent, and sirens aren't known for being silent. I see what you did there. Now, despite being directed and partially written by the same guy who worked on the first Silent Hill, I don't think Siren is talked about nearly as much as Silent Hill, and it wasn't a very long-lived gaming franchise either. It only got 2 other games. One of them never released in the US and was called Forbidden Siren 2, and the other being a PS3 title called Siren Blood Curse that was released in 2008. That is a reimagining of the first game where the events of the first game did happen, and Siren Blood Curse is like the Hollywood dramatized reenactment of it. Unfortunately, from what I gather, Blood Curse didn't get a physical release in the US, and was only available on the PlayStation Store. Though according to my search engine, you can get a region-free version that will work on US consoles, but it'll cost you. I found one on sale for $120 on Amazon. The only other Siren-related media that I know of is there were 2 manga adaptations, one of them being called Siren Akai Umi no Yobigoe and Siren Rebirth. Akai Umi no Yobigoe translates to Call of the Red Sea. This one was serialized in, I'm probably about to butcher this, Shin Mimibukuro Atmos from July 2014 to December 2015. Apparently it was scheduled to be moved online in April of 2016, but the manga went on permanent hiatus because the mangaka Wataru Kamio had health problems. Rebirth later replaced it, and according to the wiki, the mangas were supervised by the original devs and followed the plot of the first game, but they did feature events that didn't happen in the game. There was a physical volume containing the first 7 chapters that was released at some point. Unfortunately, the only version I can find on eBay is not in English, but the art looks pretty nice. But we aren't here to talk about the manga or the other games. That's beyond the scope of this video. So let's get into the game proper. Sorry to interrupt the video for a second, but I need to talk to you about something. So, in addition to running a YouTube channel, I'm also an author with 3 books out at the time of making this, and it would really mean a lot if you guys check them out on Amazon. Currently, I have the Renegade series, which has 2 books in it with a 3rd one in the works. It's a sci-fi action adventure story in the spirit of 90s cartoons and comics. The series follows a team of heroes, each with their own unique abilities, one of them being a sword-wielding, water-bending alien named Ronin. This group, called the Renegades, protect their world from all sorts of threats. The second book, Blackout, has a team following a lead on their arch-nemesis, and they end up in their universe's version of Japan. The team find themselves in the crosshairs of a dangerous group of mercenaries and the shadowy group that hired them. As things escalate between them, the mercenaries, and the ones pulling their strings, the entire fate of the island hangs in the balance, as it is plunged into darkness and held hostage with the aid of a powerful weapon called Blackout. If you're looking for something less serious and more whimsical, consider checking out Tales of the Edgeworlds Volume 1. It's a collection of 4 zany, off-the-wall comedy stories set in a broken multiverse, and features characters such as a violent, short-tempered, foul-mouthed, gun-toting space penguin named Edgy, and his crew of oddballs getting into crazy hijinks, involving mutants, space mafias, and vampires, that are also from space. It also includes a story about a dorky, clumsy combat android named Mika 227 that tangles with a feared space pirate captain to save some miners. It also recently got an audiobook, which only amplifies the hilarity in these stories, and it really makes the characters jump off the page with the over-the-top voices that the narrator does. The link to my Amazon page for all 3 books will be in the description and in the pinned comment. Back to the video. If there's one thing that immediately jumped out at me when starting up the game for the first time, it's the menu. I feel like I'm about to watch the cursed tape from Ringu. I'm surprised a long-haired Japanese girl didn't crawl out of my monitor. The music on the main menu is really ominous, and the VHS sounds at the start are pretty eerie. Music as a whole, well, it's not really music in the traditional sense. It's usually a lot of weird sounds or notes that are just designed to be atmospheric and get under your skin. The soundtrack was handled by a Hitomi Shimizu and a Gary Ashia, according to Wikipedia anyway. One thing that I think is interesting to note with the soundtrack is the music doesn't change when you're detected by enemies. Or at least if it does, it's so understated that I never noticed it. The music in this game can get very haunting, and there's this one area that has these distorted vocals, and the sound is just both beautiful and eerie. And it really enhances a very particular level that I'll talk about later. Visually, the game looks pretty good, even by PS2 standards. The environments feel like they have a good amount of detail. Bear in mind, I am running this through an emulator, and it's upscaling the resolution to 4K, and even with that, the visuals in my opinion hold up pretty well. The game does have this film grain applied to the image, and normally I'd fault a game for doing that, but with the menu having that VCR aesthetic, not to mention the cutscenes having film effects done on top of them, it kind of fits. Also, considering this game has a lot of things to do with time and the story spans hundreds of years, actually, it's fitting to me. So I didn't mind it that much. There's one thing that stands out though. It's the faces. You see, this game used real people, and what they did was they took images and video of their faces doing different expressions and then projected those expressions onto the faces of the models. Think of it like 3D facial capture that we have now, but way less advanced. This actually leads to the game having an uncanny effect because the faces don't quite look right, but the expressions are more lifelike than what you'd expect from games at this time. And it can just make things look off in an eerie, unsettling way, and that might not sound like a compliment out of the box, but it is since this is a horror game. It's like everyone is a faceless mannequin with a face projected on it, and it's a little unnerving. The Shibito, the enemies of the game, have this too, and I think they were aware of the uncanny effect the tech gave off, because you can see the actors for the Shibito pull all sorts of crazy and exaggerated faces that really play into the horror atmosphere and just make them feel freaky. From what I've heard, the sequel to this game plays that up even more. While a lot of the game's environments are dark, overcast, or drenched in heavy fog and rain, you can still see in a decent area around you. This is great because having your flashlight on is a bad idea most of the time because the enemies can see it. And like I said, the environments are pretty detailed, and that's a good thing because oh boy, you will be seeing the same areas over and over again. Sometimes starting in different locations or at different times of day. I'm gonna get into that more when I talk about the progression system. Yes, I am dedicating an entire part of this video to the progression in this game because it's paradoxically one of the best and worst aspects of the game. For now, I'm gonna talk about the sound design. It's pretty good for the time too. Nothing jumped out to me as like, bad or anything. And I can usually hear if an enemy is close to me, especially if that enemy is programmed to patrol an area. And while I'm on the subject of sound, I might as well talk about voice, because there's something really funny with that. I guess this game takes place in the British prefecture of Japan.
Oh my god, he's coming! Ah!
Help!
Mina.
Wait, are you... You must be Dr. Miyata. I'm Mina's twin, I'm Riza.
Mina's sister?
I was just on my way to see her. And is she okay? Where is she? Where is she?
Twins.
The real reason is because the game was localized in the UK, so the voices for the English dub have British accents. With the Japanese setting and all the imagery that I'm pretty sure draws heavily from Japanese mythology, the characters all sounding British is kind of unintentionally funny to me. Like, take the character Tamon Takaguchi. With his hair and the British voice, especially in the scene where he tells the student to shut up, for some reason my brain just immediately goes to Severus Snape from Harry Potter.
But what's happening? What is this? Why is this happening?
This is exactly why I told you not to come.
Professor, we need to find the villagers. They must be panicking.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no.
Please shut up.
The voice acting, it ain't great, but it was oddly endearing. It just has that early 2000s cheesy voice acting vibe that you rarely see nowadays, and I'll fully admit it might just be nostalgia talking. But let's talk about the actual gameplay. So I said Siren is a survival horror game. That might not be the most accurate title for it, because while the game does feature some things you'd expect from the genre, such as a kinda clunky melee system, and an emphasis on avoiding combat and puzzle solving, there's a lot here that's different from your typical survival horror game. In fact, I'd more accurately call it a stealth survival horror game. Fixed camera angles are a thing, but only for certain areas, usually rooms where there is an important item that you need to pick up. But most of the time the camera follows behind you like most third-person games. That's not the only difference though. Resource management isn't as big of a focus as it is in, say, Resident Evil or Silent Hill. Usually when you find an item in this game, it's an item that's meant to solve a puzzle or to help you get past an obstacle to complete the level. You won't find health pickups or ammo lying around, with the exception of one mission where part of the objective is to grab ammo before going after the enemy you're supposed to kill in order to progress. Resource and item management takes such a backseat that there isn't a button that directly takes you to your inventory. You have to pause the game and then select the option in the menu. Melee combat is a thing. Sometimes, because of the game's structure and progression and the characters you play, there are times where you will not have a weapon, and there are times where you will. And sometimes characters can lose weapons between stages. You get different melee weapons with their own stats, however it's rare that you'll find more than one in a stage. Melee combat is pretty basic. Hold R1 to go into combat mode, the camera will switch to over the shoulder, and you tap the X button to do a weak but fast hit, hold it down to do a slower, stronger hit. You don't have a block button or a way to dodge, and the game locks on whatever enemy is in front of you. And this can be an issue if you're facing more than one enemy, and it has gotten me killed before. There are guns. Guns are weird in this game. There's two types, a revolver and a rifle. The revolver you auto-aim by holding R1 and pressing X to fire. Like with a melee weapon, you'll automatically lock on to any enemy that's around you. But whether your shot lands or not seems random, but there are things you can do to influence it. If you're closer to your target, then you're more likely to hit them. If you have your flashlight turned on, your accuracy goes up. I'm not sure if there's any other factors at play besides that, but that's just what I've noticed on my own. You know how in Silent Hill and Resident Evil when you run out of ammo in the magazine and you go to fire again, your character will reload the gun for you? Yeah, Siren doesn't do that. Although sometimes if you stay still long enough with the weapon lowered, your character may just start reloading it on their own. The good news is you can cancel reloading by moving at any point, and you can use this to partially reload the weapon too. Pretty neat for when you're in a situation where an enemy is closing in while you're reloading and you need to get the hell out of there. Yeah, that's happened to me quite a few times, to be honest with you. If you do want to manually trigger the reload, you have to press triangle to open up a menu and select reload from there. Get familiar with this command menu because you will use it for everything. You see an important item on the floor? Press triangle and select the corresponding command on the menu to pick it up. See something you need to push to progress? Command menu for that too. Although, weirdly enough, for the collectibles, you don't have to do that. You just press the X button when you're near them and your character will examine them and then automatically pick them up. But going back to guns, the rifle is the absolute worst. Instead of auto aim, you raise the rifle and look through the scope and manually aim it. And these are some of the worst aiming mechanics I've ever seen. It's way too sensitive and making precision shots is a nightmare with it. The gun also sways way too much, so it feels like I gotta fight with the damn thing if I want to try and make a shot. Also, instead of using the right analog stick to aim like you would in any other game, you use the left one, which is kinda odd, but that's not the biggest problem here, it's those other things I already mentioned. Because of how awkward and clunky aiming is, using this in close quarters is not the move. Although the game will force you to do that sometimes. And now that I'm sitting here writing this and now saying it, I'm wondering if that was deliberate to have there be tension when you have the rifle. However, that tension turns to frustration very quickly, and this game does not need any help with that because, this game is fucking hard. But we aren't there yet. The reason why I say this is a stealth survival horror game is because the game really emphasizes stealth. Emphasizes might be putting it lightly. You are not going to be standing your ground and fighting against the enemies here for one really major reason. The Shibito, as the enemies are called, which I've heard translates to corpse people. Yeah, they can't be killed. Kinda. You see, you can temporarily incapacitate them, and they'll go down in this sort of kneeling state, but after a certain amount of time, they will revive and go back to patrolling the area, or chasing you if they can still see you. They don't drop items either when down. There are some exceptions to this, but those are scripted and not the norm. Some of the Shibito variants will revive very quickly, so it's a good idea to not linger around a downed one for too long, if you can help it. Shibitos are not zombies. They sort of remind me of the Ganados from Resident Evil 4 and the fact that they can still use weapons, including guns. A lot of them can speak, and it seems that they retain some aspects of their personality before they were cursed, which makes them pretty unsettling. If a Shibito has a gun and you don't, you better not get seen by them, because the ones with the revolver, they can kill you in 3 hits, or less. Some characters seem to have more health than others. There's no visible health bar anywhere, so I can't give you an exact range. But getting shot puts you into a pain state where you can't move or do anything, which can lead to them getting another shot in before you can go hide. It's not impossible to win in a fight with one with a revolver, as they do have one weakness. They have to reload after 6 shots. If you can bait them into shooting enough times without you being turned into a living pincushion, you can bum rush them while they're trying to reload and hit them until they drop. If you can get in their face and hit them and stay in range long enough, you can wear them down before they get a shot off. But this ain't easy to do, and it's a little situational. If Shibito has a rifle, on the other hand, you really don't want to be seen by them because they will kill you in 2 hits.
Nigga, did I just catch you having fun?
And they have crazy range too, and can spot you from very far away. Oh, and in 90% of stages, a game over means you gotta restart the whole level. You see what I mean about this game being frustrating? Melee enemies can kill you very easily too, especially if you don't know how to get out of being choked. You gotta wiggle the left analog stick to shake them off. You don't do that, you're dead in seconds. And unlike, say, Resident Evil 4, there's no on-screen prompt when you get grabbed to wiggle the analog stick to get out of it. You'd have to read the game manual to find that out. Now, it does seem like you do regenerate health if you avoid damage for a while. And there are instances where I've taken damage and managed to get away, and then later on taken more damage and I didn't immediately die. So it's definitely there. I don't know if you regenerate all your health or just part of it. It's a little hard to tell. But don't think you can be aggressive because of that regenerating health, because you will die. A lot. You need to be patient, and if you're a little bit impatient like me, this game will drive you mad. Okay, so if we're encouraged to avoid enemies, how do we do that? You know how a lot of stealth games have a mode that lets you see enemies through walls or tell where they are? Or see their lines of sight and stuff like that? Well, this game probably has the most unique mechanic for this, because I don't think I've seen it anywhere else. You have this ability called sight jacking. It's exactly what you think it is. You can hijack the vision of enemies and see what they see. The way it works is you press the left trigger and then rotate and point the stick in a direction until you can see something. It's like you're tuning a radio, and the stat effect you see when you can't see anyone's POV definitely plays into this. You can map a Shibito to one of the 4 face buttons so you can quickly jump between their POV if you need to. This is very useful, especially if there's one that's patrolling an area you're in and you need to keep tabs on it. However, while you're sight jacking, you can't move, and you are highlighted in the Shibito's vision, assuming it's looking in your direction, by a blue cross. If a buddy with you, they'll be marked as a green one. Sight jacking is the key feature of the game, and the one that I think is the most remembered about it. It's such a cool concept, and it builds tension and fear, especially when you sight jack a Shibito and initially you might not realize where it is, but then as it's looking around, you come to understand that it's basically right around the corner and about to see you, or you end up seeing yourself through its eyes, which is kind of unsettling. By default, if a Shibito sees you, the game will switch to their POV for a split second. At first this is kind of cool and scary, but it actually becomes disorienting to me. And I think the devs felt that way too and understood that that could get annoying to people. Because there's an option to switch it to just having your screen flash red when the enemy sees you. Or if you somehow think the game isn't hard enough, you can turn warnings off altogether. Why would you do that to yourself? Do you just hate yourself? I ended up switching to the red flash because the perspective shift can be pretty jarring. Especially if you're trying to run away already, or you get spotted by multiple Shibito. Sight jacking isn't just for stealth and avoiding enemies. Sometimes you need to use it in order to progress, as there's several missions with secondary objectives where you need to sight jack a Shibito to figure out something, like a combination for a lock, or to find out where a Shibito hid an item that you need. So you have sight jacking to avoid enemies. What else can you do? Not much, really. You can crouch, and you definitely should be crouching a lot, because walking is a bad idea. Running is a really bad idea, because the Shibito can hear you pretty well. You can also, from the command menu at any point, shout to draw an enemy's attention, which in certain situations can be useful. And sometimes you have a flashlight. The flashlight is a bit of a trap because the Shibito can see it, and if you have it on, they will spot you very quickly. And like I said, running near them is a terrible idea, so you're probably going to be crouch walking through most of the game. And unfortunately, you move very slowly while crouched. Another thing to highlight is how the map works. You know how in most games the map shows things around you and where you are in relation to those things, usually by having an icon that represents you? Yeah, this game doesn't do that. You cannot see where you are on the map. You have to figure out your location based on the landmarks that are shown on the map. Yeah, the map kind of works like how a map would in real life, which makes navigating around a little confusing when you don't know if you're near one of the landmarks or not. This can be a source of frustration if you aren't sure where to go or what direction to go in, which is one of the reasons why I'd strongly recommend just having a guide on hand, especially if you are even the slightest bit geographically challenged in video games. This will be a nightmare for you. But going back to the Shibito, there's a few variants, one being the spider. They're still human looking, but their heads have been twisted around completely, and now they have a bunch of eyes on the back of their head. They crawl on all fours and can crawl on walls and the ceilings, and they have heightened senses. They recover stupid quick when downed. The wiki says that they will get back up after about 10 seconds. They do have one weakness though. They can't open doors, so if you shut a door behind you, they can't open it to follow you. This is also true for the dog Shibito. No, they're not cursed dogs, they're cursed people on all fours. They can move really fast too. They don't have much health, but like the spider, they can get up from being down very quickly, so run. There's a flying bug-like variant called flies, and these ones are always strapped. So you fuck with the flock, you get the Glock. The only other variant are called brains. Usually the brains try to avoid you, but some of them will pursue and fight you. It depends. Defeating a brain causes all the surrounding Shibito to go down as well until the brain revives. I do wish the game had scarier designs for the Shibito because even the more mutated ones, they still feel very human. The brains have weird shit growing on their faces like fungus and octopus tentacles and things like that, but it's just not enough and I just don't really find their design scary. The flies are kind of a step in the right direction, but they still retain a lot of their human appearance, and I don't know, it just feels like there could have been more done with them, especially with how long this game is. The lack of any real curveballs in terms of enemy designs and mechanics after a while is a bit disappointing. Off the top of my head, I thought of something that maybe could work. A Shibito that can sight jack you if you rely on sight jacking too much. Like if you stay in one enemy's POV for more than a few seconds, it hijacks your vision and will then move to your location if you don't exit the mode fast enough. I can see that being a nightmare to program and implement and maybe too frustrating for the player to deal with. But that could maybe be something to force the player to adapt a completely different strategy than they would before. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here. Weirdly enough, I find the normal Shibito, which apparently according to the wiki are called half Shibito, I find them more interesting than the evolved ones. That's probably because the evolved stages have less variations in what they can do and how they act, because outside of the flying ones, they don't carry weapons. In terms of horror, the game doesn't rely on jump scares or loud noises to spook you. It's more so relying on the tension of the cat and mouse situations you're thrown into. The sight jacking ability does enhance this, and there's a sense of dread in every mission. However, due to the length of this game, the horror does fizzle out after a while, because the game doesn't come up with new ways to scare you. And sneaking around and hiding from the same enemies over and over and over again, with no new ones throwing a monkey wrench into things, does make the game feel stale after a while. This is sort of the same problem I have with Alien Isolation after a while. The game just overstays its welcome. Some missions range from being very short and surprisingly easy to long and really confusing or really frustrating. There's several missions where you gotta escort another person around, and if a Shibito does enough damage to them, it will kill them and you will fail the mission. And with their AI being atrocious and brain dead at times, they will get you caught and likely killed. I'm looking at you, you little shit. Seriously? The mission at the school where you have to escape with Harumi Yamoda was fucking rage-inducing, because she refused to keep up when we needed to run like hell while Shibito wasn't looking, and she would drag her feet long enough for the enemy to notice her. Because she's like 10 and she can't withstand a single hit from enemies, if they get close to her, you automatically fail. And this level has a lot of Shibito for you to avoid, and you don't start off with a weapon, you have to go through a lot to get one. So you will be seeing the game over screen constantly. There's other characters you gotta escort like Miyako Kajiro, who is blind. Somehow escorting the blind girl is less frustrating than the 10-year-old, because Miyako can sight jack. The way this works is, if you get too far away from her, you can just look in her direction and she'll immediately come running to your location, because she just borrows your eyes for a minute. Her ability to sight jack is relevant to the plot, but that's gonna be saved for its own section, after we talk about the elephant in the room: progression. Oh man, where do I begin with this? So this game is told across 3 days from the perspective of multiple characters. This game's story is not told in a linear manner. Instead, you jump around every level to different characters in different points in time with new objectives. The level select called the Link Navigator allows you to see where each level and each cutscene sits on the timeline. And the more I look at this, the more it just looks like an Excel spreadsheet to me. Each column is a different character, each row is a different window in time. The stages that are glowing are stages that can be accessed. In the beginning of the game, you have no control over where you end up going and are just bounced from level to level. You have to complete 19 missions before you can unlock the level select, and in order to unlock more stages and scenes, you have to complete secondary objectives in different levels. Doing these will usually unlock new stages to progress. The way progression is handled is pretty polarizing, and I both like and hate aspects of it. Presenting the story in a non-linear way does make it more mysterious, and it feels kind of like a TV show that juggles 2 or 3 storylines and bounces between them through each episode. However, one of the first problems with this system is that you will end up replaying levels in the same stage multiple times, and a lot of times it's just the time of day that's changed, or maybe some of the enemies have changed, or the starting location is different. The objectives will also be different, but sometimes it'll be something like, get to this point of the level, and then you'll come into the same area as another character, but you'll appear at the end of the level, and the goal is to get back to the original starting area. The other problem with progression is just, well, progressing. Eventually, you're gonna run out of new stages and you'll have no idea what to do to keep going. On the Link Navigator, the Excel Navigator, you'll see missions that are only half filled with the dark blue. Dark blue indicates that a mission is completed, but if it's only halfway filled, it means there's a secondary objective to complete. But when you load into the level, sometimes the game won't tell you what that second objective is. Even if you already know what it is, you might not be able to do it. Or you can do it, but the game won't register it. For example, there's one mission where you have to sneak through the area without getting detected. I actually did that the first time I went through the level, but the game only counted me as completing the first objective because I technically hadn't unlocked the second objective yet. And I wasn't sure what even triggered it. So I did a bunch of other stuff and then came back to it later. But the reason why a lot of these second objectives won't unlock for you is because you have to do prerequisites that are in other stages, usually in the same area at an earlier point in time, but that's not always the case. One example I can think of, and this is an infamous one for me, is there's a mission where you play as a school teacher, Reiko Takato, and you have to light 4 lamps on a map in a specific order. You can get the lighter at the start of the stage, but you don't have candles to light up the lamps. So where the hell do you get candles? Well, you see, what you had to do was in the level on the same day back in the school, one of the most frustrating levels in the game I might add, you had to hide Harumi in a specific locker, then go through the level as normal, and when you pick up the gymnasium key to progress, this time you'll get a cutscene where Harumi appears and says she found some candles in that closet. I have a question for you all. How the hell were you supposed to know hiding Harumi in this specific locker would have candles in it? There's multiple lockers on the map, but it has to be this exact one, and there's nothing special about it that would indicate that this is where you're supposed to go. Okay, so let's say you have the candles, now you just gotta complete the level again and use the Excel spreadsheet to go back to the later stage and light all the lanterns. But wait, you still can't activate them. So it turns out you needed to push over some random ass stone markers over in Kyoyasuda stage on the same level at 8 AM. Something that has nothing to do with Kyoya's objective in that area. But hold up, we're still not done. You had to do the same thing in Akira Shimura stage at the same time in a completely different location. And you had to knock over another marker in Shiro Miyata stage and another one in Risa Onda stage. So there are 4 things you have to do in 4 different stages before you can light these damn lanterns. Why are you lighting these things in the first place? Well, if you don't do that, you can't do Kyoyasuda's Day 3 secondary mission, and you need to do this to unlock that objective for Kyoya, because if you don't, you won't be able to get the proper ending for the game. No, I'm not bullshitting you. The entire game is structured like this. You gotta complete secondary objectives, but to complete those objectives, you gotta do some random bullshit in a different stage that you might not know you needed to do. I got another example for you. There was another mission that I needed to unlock for Tama and Takeuchi, but to unlock that, I need to do a secondary objective in another stage for a character named Kei Makino. This objective had nothing to do with Taman's story, by the way. In order to do the second objective, I needed to go into a well where there were explosives that I needed to get because Kei, in a later stage that I had already unlocked, had them and used them to blow up a mine shaft. There was just one problem though. I needed rope to get into the well. Where was this rope? Oh, it was all the way back in a mission on day 1 where you had to look for a code that's written in blood on a wall and then rewind a tape in a tape recorder to that timestamp to hear a code to unlock a combination lock that had the rope I needed inside. Now sometimes the game will give you a hint on what to do in order to unlock another stage. In this case, the game did give me that hint, but here's the problem. The hint only triggers if you go to replay the stage that you need to do the prerequisite in. You see the problem, don't you? So I'd have to already come back to the stage, despite it not being on the same map at all, and then I'd find out that there's a prerequisite I could do here. The Excel Navigator doesn't mark if there's a prerequisite that you missed that you can use to unlock a second mission later on. So you'd have no way of knowing where to go to make the second objective possible in the level you're trying to do, unless you had a guide pulled up. You know what? I got one more example for you, just to drive the point home. And this one was driving me up a wall for a while. It's on day 2. The second objective is to create an entryway for Harumi Yamada. You have to go through the stage as you would normally, but this time you need to go through a specific house to get a tool that you need to open a manhole towards the end of the stage. The problem I had with that was the door to the house I need to go to get the tool was locked, and there was no way to open it in the level. So after fumbling around for a while trying to figure out if there was something that I need to do in the stage to trigger it, I gave up and looked up the walkthrough. I had to jump back to day 1 to a stage with Shiro Miyata, and I had to hide Risa in that house, and doing that triggers a cutscene where she unlocks the door. The game gave me the secondary objective for that mission to open up the manhole so Yamada could get in, but I couldn't actually do it yet because the door was locked, which leads to unnecessary frustration, as I thought I was missing something in the level itself. And like I said, I had to break out the game facts guide. And while I'm on that subject, thank you Shunichiro for the guide. This video would not exist without it. Thank you, you are goated. I don't know how the hell anyone was supposed to figure out how to progress in this game without a guide. From what I heard from NitroRad's video on Siren, this obtuse and cryptic nature was deliberate because Toyama apparently wanted to be a game that the community of players would have to come together online to try and figure out. And that reminds me of the final puzzle in PT, where it was not clear how to trigger the end of the demo and you had to go online to find solutions, and there were multiple. It also reminds me of how people were desperately searching and combing through the game Shadow of the Colossus looking for answers or secret. Because for a time there was a rumor that, oh, there's a secret 17th Colossus in the game, and people were trying to find it. There isn't, unfortunately, but it was a cool little thing that everyone was trying to figure out if there was any more secrets in the game. And don't get me wrong, this idea of having the community come together to try and figure out the solutions to stuff, it's kind of a neat idea on paper, but in practice, it's just not that fun. And if you didn't have internet back when this thing came out, I don't know what the hell you were supposed to do outside of buying a strategy guide. Now, the actual game manual does contain some hints, but these are also beyond cryptic, and some of them only make sense to me since I've already completed the game. The progression also raises problems with how the story is presented, because it's common to complete a level and then get launched to a scene that has nothing to do with what you were just doing, and it can be a bit jarring. Sometimes these secondary objectives feel random as shit and don't seem tied to whatever mission you unlock next. A lot of scenes are also structured in a weird way. There's some that almost feel like they end in the middle of a sentence and they just feel out of context, especially the flashbacks of things that led to the incident that kicked off the events of the game. Even though this game predates Dark Souls and the whole Souls-like story structure, some of this stuff makes me think of that with how you have to piece together the narrative, but I'm gonna get to the plot later. Another problem I have with how the game is structured and how you progress is you will end up replaying the same areas over and over again. And it's not like that when you replay these levels, sometimes you'll see a different part of the area that you couldn't access before. A lot of times it's just the same area and very little has changed. And sometimes the secondary objectives require you to play the level almost exactly the same way as you did the first time, but then do something different right before the end. This can end up feeling really tedious. This game also ends up being really long too. The website How Long to Beat says beating the main story would take you 19.5 hours. My in-game save time on the save file was 10 hours, but that's not factoring me using save states to reload when I fuck up. The actual playtime on the emulator says about 28 hours, but there were times where I had the game paused because I had to do other stuff. So I'll say it was around 20 hours. 20 hours is a long time for a horror game, especially one where the mechanics don't get any more complex as you progress, and with the exception of the Shibito Nest area and Inferno on day 3, before you even get to the 20-hour mark or even closer there, you will have seen everything in the game in terms of locations and enemies. Even if you're using a guide to optimize your playthrough so you're not stuck in looping through levels and not able to figure out what to do, this game will turn into a drag. Couple the confusing progression with the punishing difficulty, and you have a game that can feel extremely grueling. Don't get me wrong, the non-linear cryptic fashion does make the game feel mysterious, and it can make things more engaging as you have to be paying attention, and you end up feeling like Charlie in that one episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, standing at the conspiracy web with pictures and threads going everywhere. It's definitely a unique way to tell a story, and it fits because time is behaving weirdly in this place, and that's a big part of the story. There's moments where you'll see an event in question will lead up to that, and then you'll unlock a mission that takes place earlier that provides the context, and it's kind of gratifying. You get this little aha moment when the pieces fit together. It's ambitious and ballsy, and I have to respect it because I don't think it would have had the same impact if it was told in a traditional linear fashion. But speaking of the story, I think it's time we talk about that. I will warn you, I'm going to spoil the entire game, and some of this is coming from the wikis because there were things that I definitely missed. I'm no Vadi Vidya. If you want to experience the game yourself and don't want the story spoiled, skip to the time on screen, and judging by how long the script is, we're probably going to be here a while. Alright, that's your warning. I'm going to assume you don't care about spoilers for a 20-year-old horror game. Let's go. Okay, so our plot focuses on 10 characters: Kiyoya Suda, Harumi Yamada, Taman Takaichi, Kei Makino, Reiko Takato, Naoko Mihama, Akira Shimura, Shiro Miyata, and Risa Anda. Yeah, that's a lot of characters in this game, and these are just the ones you end up playing as. Everyone ends up in a remote Japanese mountain village named Hanuda, and shit quickly hits the fan. Kiyoya's reason for heading to the village is because he heard stories about a mass murder that happened in the village many years ago, and he's one of those people that's really fascinated by that stuff. He ends up wandering through the woods and discovers a ritual being conducted. A woman named Miyako Kajiro is the offering during the ritual and is not a willing participant. Kiyoya ends up causing a disruption that allows Miyako to escape, which causes the ritual to fail. This is the inciting incident for the entire game. Something tells me Miyako also smashing the head of a being called Dadatsuchi also didn't help. More on that later. Because the ritual failed, the entire town is pulled into an alternate dimension. All the water has been replaced with a weird red substance. This red substance also rains from the sky, and the entire village is now on an island surrounded by this stuff. No one can leave. Kiyoya, panicking and running away from the ritual site, is confronted by a police officer named Tetsuo Ishida. Ishida escalates things by trying to kill Kiyoya. Kiyoya ends up running him over with a car nearby. Kiyoya, realizing what he just did, goes to investigate the cop. At the same time, an earthquake triggers and a blaring siren rings out. Suddenly, the dead Tetsuo ain't so dead anymore, and he revives as a Shibito. Tetsuo ends up cornering Kiyoya and shoots him off a cliff. Thanks to the ritual failing and the village being pulled into the other world, everybody is rendered unconscious for several hours. Despite being shot off a cliff, Kiyoya isn't dead. He wakes up and finds a woman named Hisako Yao. She mentions how his body has absorbed the red water, but she mentions that he absorbed just enough of it and that any more would be a problem. It's not conveyed in this cutscene, but that's because the red water turns you into a Shibito, and if that happens, you'll be under the influence of Dadatsuchi, the god the ritual was trying to revive. It seems that the red water replaces the person's blood, and eventually they'll just turn into a Shibito. So Kiyoya had fallen into the river and absorbed some of that, and doing this has also given him the ability to sight jack, which is actually one of the signs that you're becoming a Shibito, because they're all linked by a hive mind, and you sight jacking into the eyes of the enemies is you tapping into that. Hisako is a mysterious woman in an outfit similar to a nun. She helps us out during a mission. Eventually, Kiyoya hears a scream and ends up finding Miyako. Miyako asks for his help because she doesn't want to go with her brother Jun. Jun was in the ritual, and wants to bring Miyako back to perform it properly this time, but Miyako isn't big on the whole ritual sacrifice thing. She has a little bit of an issue with that, so she flees to Kyoya. They end up hiding in an abandoned house for a while. Meanwhile, in elementary school, Reiko Takato and her student Harumi Yamoda are trapped there by a bunch of Shibito. While they're slinking around, Reiko is confronted by the transformed principal, who has succumbed to the curse, and he tries to kill them both. The two escape and end up hiding somewhere else for now. We'll circle back to them later. Tama Takaguchi, a professor, and his student Yoriko Ano ended up in the town, and of course, it's now full of Shibito. Tama goes to investigate alone, but Yoriko gets attacked and is narrowly saved by a hunter named Akira Shimura. Akira lost his family in a landslide 30 years ago, and that family of his is going to be relevant later. As the two of them flee, they see a ritual where the Shibito are bathing in the red water. Akira refers to this as the Umi Okuri and the Umi Gari rituals. Umi Okuri apparently means sending or going to the sea, and Umi Gari means to return from the sea. Every 6 hours when the siren blares across the village, the Shibito bathe in the red liquid, and when they come out of it, they are more transformed and take on less human traits. This makes them fall further under Dadatsushi's control. Upon seeing this, Akira gives up hope and shoots himself in the head, right in front of Yoriko.
It's over. I'm going to get out of here before I turn into a monster as well.
Yoriko, for some reason, decides to not take the rifle with her and runs away, but she eventually finds Tamon again. Meanwhile, Shiro Miyata, the head of a clinic, wakes up in the middle of the woods in front of an empty grave. There's a really dark meaning behind that grave. You see, Shiro has a fiancé, or had a fiancé named Mina Onda. Mina told him that she was preggers, and he had a very calm and rational response to finding out that he was going to be a dad in a few months. He pulled an Anakin Skywalker and choked her to death, and then took advantage of the ritual to sneak her body out into the woods to dig a grave and bury her. However, the siren went off and he was rendered unconscious for a few hours. When he woke up, he found that Mina's grave was dug up and her body was gone. And not only that, it was dug up from the inside. Later on, Shiro finds Mina's shoe. I'm sure this won't come up later. He actually runs into Risa Onda, Mina's twin sister. Eventually, the two end up returning to the clinic. However, while they're there, Risa sees Mina through the window for a second. Around this time, Kei Makino, who was a local priest and was present during the ritual, ends up finding a student named Tomoko Maeda. Tomoko got lost and Kei tries to get her back to her parents, but they get separated by a Shibito sniper whose bullets are rated E for everyone. Tomoko ends up hiding in a nearby shrine while Kei fled the area. Tomoko ends up running into Hisako. Hisako sends her to a house full of Shibito, and Tomoko is killed. Yeah, murking kids is not off the table in this game. You don't actually see Tomoko die, but still, this game ain't fucking around. Tomoko's last level has her walking towards the church where her parents are waiting, and on her way, she sees weird things and the Shibito do not attack her. This is the level I was talking about where the music really just sells this eerie vibe. Now, you know what? I'd rather just show you than tell you. Anyway, she walks to the church window and sees her parents, but there's a problem.
Mummy, let me in! Mummy! Mummy, let me in! Mummy!
Tomoko!
No, please!
Yeah, Tomoko's now a Shibito. The whole time we were playing this level from the perspective of a Shibito, and she didn't even know. Yeah, this entire eerie, peaceful level was just a setup to that reveal. If that wasn't dark enough for you, at some point her parents are killed and corrupted too. And there's a later mission where you have to escape the house as Harumi while the Maeda family are walking around as Shibito and you have to try and avoid them. It's pretty creepy. Eventually, Kei Makino shows up at the clinic and runs into Risa and Shiro. And guess what? Kei and Shiro are twin brothers, but they were raised by different families, so that's why their last names aren't the same. Risa decides to go looking for Mina on her own, and when she does, she probably wishes she hadn't because Mina's a Shibito now.
Risa. Mina? Mina, is that you?
A Shibito brain to be exact. Risa ends up escaping Mina and then pulls a fire alarm to warn the two brothers that the clinic is not safe anymore. Risa is then cornered by Mina, but Shiro ends up saving her by dumping acid on Mina, which while it doesn't kill her, it does drive her away. Because Kei froze and didn't react fast enough, Shiro tells his brother that he ain't built for this, and decides to go hunt Mina on his own. He's not successful with that. While Risa and Kei wait, they're suddenly ambushed by Mina. Weirdly enough, Mina doesn't kill Kei, just knocks him out. She then grabs Risa, and I don't know if it's because they're twins or if it's because she's a Shibito brain, but somehow she's able to link her mind to Risa, and Risa becomes possessed and she sees what Shiro did to Mina. Risa ends up acting like a Shibito and dresses in a nurse's outfit, just like Mina, and enters the room Shiro is in. Shiro, initially mistaking Risa for Mina and wanting to up his kill count on the Onda family, chokes out Risa too. Risa immediately turns into a Shibito after dying and chases Shiro around the clinic. Shiro ends up defeating her and Mina, and he also finds an important relic called the Uryans. The Uryans are statuettes from the Jomon period. Who created them and why is a mystery, and I don't think the game ever answers that. But these statues, they were in the hands of a decrepit woman named Miyako Kajiro. This is not the same Miyako that's running around with Kyoya. This is a different one. She was supposed to be sacrificed in the same ritual, but that was back in 1976. And that was interrupted by Hisako, the woman who found Kyoya after he was shot and also led Tomoko to her death. This time when the ritual failed, part of the village got yeeted into the other world, and this caused a landslide that killed Akira's family. Hisako helps this Miyako escape with Akira's son. Somehow, Miyako found the Uryan, and the trio made it to the clinic, but Akira's son named Takafumi began to transform to a Shibito, so to not harm the other two, he had himself wrapped up and covered in chains, and then had a stake driven through his heart. And to make extra sure he couldn't cause a problem later, he had himself locked in a disposal container in a clinic. You're probably wondering, how old is Hisako if she's been running around since 1976? Old. Very old. You see, Hisako is immortal, and so is this Miyako. I will explain why later. Hisako had been alive so long she had forgotten her reason for being granted immortality. While in the clinic, she remembered and she realized that she had foiled her own plan. Yeah, she played herself. So with her memories back, at least temporarily, she tricked this Miyako into the secret basement, then tied her up there and left her trapped there with no way to escape. Yeah, she left the girl trapped down there for 27 years. No food, no water, and unable to die because of her immortality. Absolute hell. Anyway, back to the Uryan. They will become extremely important later. And according to the wiki, the word can either mean the universal flames or the flames of the cosmos. Both meanings are fitting, and you'll see what I mean later. But back to Shiro, he begins performing an autopsy on the twins. As gruesome as it sounds, he's doing it to try and figure out if there's a way to actually kill them. There is, but not by conventional means, as they regenerate no matter what you do to them. Even dismemberment doesn't work, which would have been my go-to with things that just regenerate. Okay, what if I cut them apart enough? Do they still regenerate? The answer in this case is unfortunately yes. This scene gets extra fucked up because Kei enters the room and Shiro stomps on the undead fetus that was inside Mina. Yeah, man stomps on his own child. He then gives Kei his notes on the Shibito and mocks Kei by saying it is the secret to everlasting life. Kei calls him insane, and he kind of is, but he's also kind of right. The Shibito are eternal, but that's not a good thing, and Kei figures it out later that everlasting life means everlasting pain. To not make this segment overly long, even though I'm pretty sure I failed at that, I'm gonna start skipping around. Reiko and Harumi are hiding in a shack with Shibito are coming, and they notice that the Shibito appear to be gathering materials to build something. This too will become important later. Reiko and Harumi try to escape, but things go south, and Reiko ends up sacrificing herself to draw away the Shibito from Harumi, only to then blow herself up. R.I.P. Reiko. On day 2, Miyako, not the one trapped in the basement, gives Kyoya some of her blood by slicing open her palm, and then slicing open his and touching her palm with his to transfer blood. This now means Kyoya won't turn into a Shibito, saving his life. The duo then have to escape the house, but Jun finds them, and Kyoya is shot again. And I don't know what it is, but something about the way this cutscene is done made me laugh. It's supposed to be shocking, but something about the way it's structured is just funny to me.
You?
I have a name. Kyoya.
Thanks, Kyoya.
I just came to get you back.
Maybe I just have a screw loose, I don't know. But Hisako also now remembers her mission and abducts Miyako for the ritual. Yoriko is also shot by Akira, who has now become a Shibito. She's saved by Shiro, who found Kyoya, and Shiro transfers some of Kyoya's blood to Yoriko, so now she's immune to becoming one of those things too. After that, the two head to see what the Shibito are building. It's a giant nest. The nest is meant to house Dadatsushi when they revive him. Now, when I say nest, you're probably thinking of, some disgusting, like, hive-looking thing, like something out of Alien. No, this is like, you know how like when birds build a nest, they collect like random sticks and twigs and stuff? Picture that, but it seems like they're collecting random materials from houses and they're just building like a maze of like structures and stuff to make the nest. It's a very weird look to it, and it is the most unique area in the game, and unfortunately you don't get to it till very late in the game. Tamon also heads to the nest after finding Yoriko's glasses in the clinic. Harumi, after escaping the house with Tomoko's corrupted family, ends up fighting Reiko, only she's a Shibito too. After running from her, Harumi inadvertently ends up in the nest too. Kyoya and Yoriko make it to the core of the nest just in time for Hisako to perform the ritual, and Dadatsushi is reborn. Kei and Tamon arrive at the same time. Dadatsushi's rebirth isn't perfect because Miyako gave Kyoya some of her blood, so Dadatsushi is incomplete, and he goes on a rampage that sends Kyoya, Kei, and Tamon to the bottom of the nest. Kyo and Tamon wake up and agree to work together to take out Dadatsushi, but they leave Kei behind since he's unconscious. Kei wakes up later and finds Shiro. Shiro and Kei have a conversation, and then Shiro puts a gun to his head, but instead of killing himself, he changes his mind last second and shoots Kei, and then jacks his clothes and impersonates him. He then finds Kyoya and gives him one of the Urian and tells him that his role is to erase everything in this dimension. Kyoya notices that Kei is acting strange but doesn't know it's Shiro. Shiro then wanders off with his Urian and ends up blowing up a dam that does damage to the nest, and the destruction this causes ends up exposing Dadatsushi to sunlight, and because he's incomplete, the sunlight actually burns him and he burns to death. But he's not exactly dead because Dadatsushi has some dimension-altering powers. He ends up retreating into another realm called Inferno that contains a comet he used to travel through space. I will get to that in a minute. Hisako and Jun are taken into Inferno with him, and Jun becomes a Shibito and guards Dadatsushi because Dadatsushi is burned and just kind of sick, and he's defenseless outside of Jun guarding him. More on that later. But after blowing up the dam, Shiro reaches the Red Sea and he sees the people who have resisted Dadatsushi's will and didn't fully transform into Shibito. They are now just shambling, rotting corpses that are unable to die. Shiro decides he wants to go out on his own terms and activates his Urian and offers his soul to power it and uses that power to end all the suffering that these Shibito that resist the call are dealing with. These are the villagers from the 1976 ritual that failed. Shiro dies in the process and ends up seeing Mina and Risa right before he walks to a hole that the Urian made, where he burns to death. Yeah, that's how Shiro's story ends. But in the chaos of the flood that attacks the dam and that caused Dadatsushi to be burned, Kyoya is able to make it to the entrance of Inferno, and with the help of Miyako's spirit and her blood, he's able to enter it and confront Jun and Dadatsuchi to end this. This boss fight is fucking awful, by the way. You see, Jun has a rifle and so do you. There are pillars around the arena that you can use to take cover behind, and you can use to help you approach Jun without being riddled with bullets. The problem is the collisions on the pillars are borked, and sometimes you will get shot even though Jun's bullet shouldn't be able to hit you. If that wasn't bad enough for you, 2 shots from the rifle is enough to end you, and you have to hit him 4 times. Oh, remember how I said the rifle sucks when it comes to aiming? Yeah, this fight makes that impossible to ignore. After hitting him 4 times, Jun decides guns are for pussies and draws a katana. You have to just run at this point, and that's easier said than done depending on how close Jun was to you before you triggered the phase change, because this fucker is fast as hell, and because of how the camera is, you can't check if he's behind you while you're running. After running around for a minute or so, the Urien does activate. However, unlike when Shiro used it, Kyoya doesn't die from using it and can use it multiple times. You have to land a direct hit with the Urien. The problem is, its attack is very slow and Jun is very fast. Also, another problem is during that brief second before you gain control of your character after the cutscene, Jun can run up to you and slash you. You really have to get lucky and hope he's not right on your ass when you turn around and use the Urien. When you do though, you kill him instantly. Now the real fight begins. Hisako sacrificed herself to restore Dadatsuchi, so now you have to fight him. Dadatsuchi is invisible, and the only way you can tell where he is by sight-jacking him and watching him fly towards you, then exiting sight-jacking and turning around and using the Urien on him. This is easier said than done, as it can be disorienting jumping from his POV to yours in time before he snatches you. Fortunately, the devs gave you another way to do this fight. When you sight-jack Dadatsuchi, Miyako appears beside you and points to something. Running in that direction will lead you to a strange pyramid that lets you see Dadatsuchi's reflection, so you can tell where he's coming from. Although sometimes his AI will decide to float above the pyramid and not do anything, so you can't hit him, and you have to back up to draw him out, and this can lead to him getting some cheap shots on you. Anyways, after 3 hits from the Urien, congratulations, you've won the game. I kind of call this the joke ending, but it really isn't. It's just part of the ending. You can actually get this without even fighting Dadatsuchi, depending on what missions you end up doing, as a lot of the missions will just send you to this cutscene with no fucking context. It is weird. To get the full true ending, you have to do all the other secondary objectives and that obnoxious lantern one. Before I get to that, I'm gonna explain what Dadatsuchi is and what the hell is going on with Hisako. Okay, so Dadatsuchi fell from a comet that passes over Earth every 333 years, and it crashed into Hanuta in 684 AD. It lands on a rock formation called the Mana Stone. It lies there, but the villagers see it, and you see the villagers were going through a hard time. Famine, to be specific. They mistake Dadatsuchi for some kind of fish and decide to eat the space monster. It's worth pointing out that Dadatsuchi is in an immature state at this point, but Dadatsuchi was not happy with this shit and decided to curse the entire village, which killed everyone on the spot, except for one, a pregnant woman named Hisako. Yeah, that Hisako. Hisako was instead made immortal, and she sought to make up for what had happened by bringing Dadatsuchi back to life in the future. Hisako's descendants became the Kajiro family, which is why they're immune to being the Shibito. So yeah, Hisako was kind of killing off her own descendants and sacrificing them for the ritual. I'm guessing this is because of her exposure to Dadatsuchi. They just carry it in their blood, and they're just the key to resurrecting Dadatsuchi for some reason. But Jun is one of them, and if you're wondering how he turned into a Shibito, it's because he got killed, and Dadatsuchi used his powers to reanimate him. Hisako creates a religion that worships Dadatsuchi as a god. She ends up posing as a maid in her own family, the Kajiro family. But because of how long she's been alive, she started to forget who she was and what her purpose was, and she ended up interrupting the ritual in 1976. In 2003, when the ritual failed, Hisako didn't remember who she was either until she found a container that held Dadatsuchi's head in it. She also sees an older version of herself with white hair. This allows her to remember who she is and what she needs to do. So she kidnaps Miyako and sacrifices her, and in the end, after Kyoya kills Jun, she sacrifices herself to revive Dadatsuchi. Although she's somehow not actually dead, but we'll get into that later. So to get the actual ending, you have to decapitate Dadatsuchi during the fight using the katana that Jun has, which he drops at the end of the fight. Doing that is easier said than done because you gotta go through the Jun fight again, and you have to hit Dadatsuchi with the Urien twice and then switch to the sword to finish him off. The katana is called the Homuranagi, and it can gain the power to kill Shibito and Dadatsuchi if you lit up the lamps in the right order to free something called the Kiruden, which is some kind of protective force. But after hitting Dadatsuchi twice, you then, with the Urien, you then have to draw the sword and hold R1 to charge the blade until you see it glowing, and then wait for Dadatsuchi to get in range and strike him. If you do that correctly, you'll get the true ending.
Professor, it's no time to be playing happy families. Come on!
Father.
So, Harumi is the only one that we know for a fact escapes. The fate of the others is unclear, outside of Kyoya. The wiki states that she was the only one to escape because she was the only one that wasn't infected by the red water. But she was able to sight Jack, though apparently she had latent psychic ability anyway, so she was able to do that without, turning into one of them, or the risk of turning into one of them, I guess. But Kyoya ends up with probably the worst ending of them all. He's trapped in the other world with the power of the Urien and the sword, and he goes on a rampage destroying all the Shibito. That's what we were seeing in that kind of just out of context joke ending thing. That was him just massacring the village and getting rid of all the Shibito. It's kind of funny because his whole reason for being here is because he wanted to investigate a story of a mass murder in the village, and he essentially is the one that commits it. Also, while Dadatsuchi is defeated, you notice in the final cutscene, Hisako is not looking old, and she falls into a void while clutching his head, the one that Kyoya severed. So the implication is that the Hisako that was standing in the river and gave the younger one the head is the one from the end of the game after Dadatsuchi's been defeated. So the implication for that is that everything is a cycle, and that the events of this game will just keep happening over and over and over again. Because remember, Miyako destroyed the head before the ritual at the start of the game, so they didn't have a head again to do the ritual. So through time shenanigans, this is how she got another Dadatsuchi head to actually do the ritual proper this time. Well, somewhat proper. And when you run out of new missions, the game will outright say continue to next loop. So yeah, I think the game is trying to say this world is caught in a time loop. A time loop of eternal suffering by the looks of it. I think that's kind of the true horror of the game. Overall, the story, when you piece it all together, is pretty interesting. It's definitely crazier than Silent Hill in my opinion, and it's mega cryptic. Was it worth the frustration this game causes? Well, we'll find out in the conclusion. Okay, so hopefully I didn't talk you guys' head off too much with the story explanation here. I omitted some stuff, and there's probably a ton of things that I didn't pick up on. Probably a lot of allegory and symbolism that just went over my head because I'm not terribly familiar with Japanese mythology, and I was rushing to finish the game to hopefully have it done before Halloween. Hopefully you're watching this video either on Halloween or before then. So to wrap this up, I can definitely see why this game was polarizing and wasn't as popular as Silent Hill. Between the brutal difficulty and the obtuse nature of progression, this would probably put off a lot of people, and also because of its length and lack of new ideas to keep the gameplay fresh, this game turns into a drag. While the plot is fascinating once you have some level of understanding it, and the way it's presented is pretty interesting, that too can be frustrating because of how things are presented to you without much context, and you may struggle to progress to even unlock that stuff. If I could describe this game in one word, and I've been using it throughout the video for a reason, it would be frustrating. If I didn't have save states to give myself checkpoints, I may have lost my mind trying to clear this game for this video. Now I'm just gonna lose my mind trying to edit all of this together. That being said, it did feel gratifying seeing the true ending and figuring out what was going on. Again, I won't lie, I had to use the wiki to help make some of this stuff make sense to me. You'd think with how much I've called this game frustrating and a chore to get through at points, I would say I hated this game or wouldn't recommend it. But somehow, despite all of that, I can't believe I'm saying this, I'm gonna recommend it, but with a big ass asterisk next to it. 1, play it with a walkthrough. I cannot stress that enough. It will make the headache slightly more tolerable. Just slightly. The other thing is, take it slow. Don't do what I did and sit down and spend 8 hours trying to power through the game on a weekend to try and finish it in time for a deadline. Don't do that. You will probably hate yourself. Pace yourself. This game is hard as shit. And if you aren't a very patient person and you don't have nerves of steel, you might not get through this game. This might not be the game for you. Especially if you aren't using an emulator to make checkpoints for yourself to save on time. Because like I said, 90% of the time when you die, you gotta restart the whole mission, and that is frustrating. I'd recommend only playing this maybe like 2 hours a day or something and just like spread it out over a few days. Because this ain't the kind of game that I feel like you can marathon for a whole afternoon. Because like I said, you will probably hate yourself and the game for a while if you do that. Trust me, I know. With those caveats in mind, what you get is a unique survival horror experience with a fun mechanic with the sightjacking and a bonkers story that I don't think you'll find anywhere else or presented in this manner. The game has its moments, but it can feel like a bit of a slog just to get there though. I just wish we had more varied enemies, maybe some checkpoints, and the secondary objectives and the requirements to unlock them were communicated better. Apparently, the sequel Forbidden Siren 2 that never got released in the US fixed most of these issues, and at one point before I realized just how much of an undertaking this game was gonna be, I entertained the idea of trying to do both games in one video. Yeah, that is not happening. I'll probably cover Siren 2 some other time. It probably won't be another Halloween thing, I'll probably do it a little sooner than that, but as far as what the next video is gonna be, I might go back to my Doom grind after this or pick another game. A shorter one, hopefully. If you made it all the way through this video, can you please hit that like button and leave a comment and consider subscribing so you can keep up with the future videos? And I will hopefully see you later in another one.